Dear viewers, subscribe to the channel and put a like on the video so YouTube can recommend you new stories and new chapters. If anything, you can always remove the like if you don't like the story. Thank you for your support, and here we go. On the Road to Happiness. Chapter 1. Okay, I have to admit it. By posting this message on that board, I'm advertising myself as nothing less than a fool. I'm selling my abilities for money. But honestly, I didn't expect my growing infatuation with Damian Saunders, my best and most loyal client to date, to even surprise me. I always thought I would be 100% committed to Aaron, but Damian was my type in many ways, and in some ways he wasn't. Unlike Abel, this man was born with a diamond-encrusted spoon that dangled from his mouth. As time went on, it became more and more luxurious. He was making so much money by the minute, and never faced the hardship of not having it. Something I had known for most of my life. Sometimes it made things a little weird, especially when it came to dates like this. Once in Damian's world, I realized that he loved the finer things in life. It was truly all he knew. That's why our dates with him were expensive and lavish. I never knew how to dress for such an occasion, but it rarely mattered. He usually had a pre-made outfit that he bought for me after getting my measurements from the old lady who was altering my dress. It was almost creepy if it wasn't so sweet and kind of him to take care of me. It was obvious he was doing it from the bottom of his heart, even if sometimes he was a total goofball, like this time. While I was busy working, my thoughts of men were a million miles away. But that soon changed. A delivery man stopped by and handed me a white box wrapped in a pink bow. I excused myself and ran with it under my arm to the staff room. I quickly discovered that it contained the dress and a pair of panties I was supposed to wear for that night. I ran back into the store and stared after him for a long time, as the sight of the man who had brought it said that he knew what was in the box, until he finally left with his candy bar that had taken him forever to buy. Just because I wanted more than one man in my life didn't mean I wanted all men. I don't think the driver would have paid as well as Damian. That was another thing I was genuinely unsure of when it came to this case. I really hoped that everyone who knew what I did, and who I was, must have considered me a girl of easy virtue to some degree. I can't argue that I'm not. I go and do what I want with any man who tosses me change. As far as I was concerned, there really was something known and special between me and them. All three were so sweet and understanding, although demanding of my time, energy, and body, to the point where I doubted if I could ever keep up. That day, after finishing work, I just wanted to sit back and relax. I wasn't too surprised when I saw a car waiting for me outside. All I really wanted was a cigarette, and not to fidget while smoking. Just then, I saw who was getting out of the driver's seat to open the door for me. When I saw a tall, blonde-haired man opening the passenger door with a phone between his shoulder and ear, I flinched, stuffed the unlit cigarette back into the pack, and rushed toward him, clutching the thin box tightly to my chest. Throwing it into the car, I jumped into his waiting arms and found myself in his massive embrace. "Damian, I didn't expect you to pick me up in person," I shrieked as he let go of me and pulled the phone away from my face to hang it up and put it in my pocket. "I thought it would be best if you saw me first. Well, except for my messenger," he grinned, looking at the white box I'd tossed on the passenger seat. "But since I'm here to pick you up, you'll have to get dressed on the way," he playfully teased, though I could tell how serious he meant it. At least he had a spacious enough car. Changing clothes was easy enough, but I was worried that the tinting on the windows wouldn't be able to hide me from prying eyes. It was the panties that I changed into first. I slipped out of the rather boring pair of white cotton ones I'd worn to work that day and pulled on the bold and exotic red ones Damian had brought. "No bra," he ordered. "You won't need one with the dress anyway." We stopped at a red light, and I blushed at his command. Damian really knew what he wanted and never bothered to ask for it. Before I could even look up to undo it, he had already done it for me and pulled it down with his right hand. I whimpered and shuddered slightly. He turned the air conditioning on full blast as I pulled away from him. Okay. I need to get dressed," I said, not wanting any outsider to see me like this and what he was doing to me. Sometimes Damian could be so indifferent when it came to things like this. He never cared if anyone saw us, and that was great, but only sometimes. Thank goodness. At this point, Damian stepped back and let me quickly put on my sundress. It was blue fabric with pink roses all over it. There was only a short blue slip underneath the skirt, and then it ended, and the only thing covering my legs was the sheer material of the top. The top was like a corset as it compressed my breasts and stomach. Under a layer of tissue paper in the box, I also found a pair of lace-up sandals. It took me a little while to lace them both up. It's awkward to do in a moving car. Soon they were laced up to below my knees. They were brown and pretty, matching well with the beautiful dress he'd given me. I leaned back in my seat and adjusted the strap on my chest, feeling a little tight. My heart raced. What about the makeup? What about hair? Just in case, I did a little makeup before work, but nothing major. I just put my hair up in a high ponytail at the back of my head. Don't worry about it, he assured me, not even looking at the road. I have an appointment with a stylist on the way. Thought you could use a haircut too. Well, it sounded like Damien did. It didn't shock me too much, that's for sure. The hair and makeup sounded pleasant. Though it bothered me how short he wanted my hair. I liked it when it was long, and I wanted it to stay that way. I learned from the stylist that he did want to remove a few centimeters, but it didn't make me feel too uncomfortable. So, 2 hours later, after finishing the job, I walked out of the salon with my hair just above my shoulders and a layered cut. It looked really nice, as did my new makeup. Damien was very pleased with the result when I was led back to the reception area. When I got back to the street, I stopped Damien at the car, hurriedly pulled out a cigarette and lit it quickly, puffing hard to get my much-needed dose. 2 hours was long enough. I earned an annoyed snicker from my lover. "Those things are so bad for you," he grunted and muttered, just like he did every time he saw me with them. I rolled my eyes and took a big drag, almost spitefully pulling the much-needed flavored smoke into my lungs. "I know," I replied, letting the smoke out of my mouth without worrying about it in the slightest. I had been smoking for some time now, and it couldn't be said that I was blind to the facts of smoking. It was just a vice like any other, maybe a little worse for my health, but in the end, who cared? It wasn't like Damien would be standing at my bedside 40 years later, holding my hand as I let out my last wheeze and passed away. It wasn't that long, not like someone who loved smoking as much as I did. I'm not sure I'll last much longer. Too much hope for reality. Why did he care so much about risk? Maybe he just didn't like the smell. I was punishing my lungs. "Why not just take me to Amelia?" I asked, still enjoying my smoke, even if he hated it. "She doesn't have a studio," Damien replied. "Besides, we should give her time off." Yeah, I'm sure she needed time off. Time to fuck my boyfriend. Was I angry about it? I can't say. I was angry at first, that's for sure. But now? It's okay now. Why wouldn't it be? I had so many men to take care of, and Aaron could have another woman to enjoy. It was just hard for me to accept, having to remember that he'd been through the same thing. Twice. "I see." I said it flatly, not showing my excitement to my companion. He wouldn't be interested in watching all of this. It wasn't like we knew each other on that level. My insecurities were my own, especially when it came to being around Damien, who watched me while I took a long drag on my cigarette. "Make sure you don't mess up your makeup. We need to be at the premiere in about an hour," he informed me, checking the time on his phone again. I arched an eyebrow. "Premiere?" I asked, not sure what he meant. I had never been to a premiere until now. By far the most exciting event for me was opening a pack of cigarettes, but even that didn't happen very often. It seemed like I was learning a lot of new things with these men. Yes, the premiere of the movie? I couldn't be more uninterested since it's some kind of superhero movie. "Thought you might come and help me keep from being bored." The man chuckled, flashing his perfect white teeth, and then snatched the half-finished cigarette from me with force and stamped it into the pavement with the heel of his shiny shoe. I groaned slightly, since I was even enjoying it, and earned a sharp look from the large man that silenced me on the spot. Just looking at his face made my blood run cold in my veins. That's right, this was a job, and like any job, I had to know my place. At least he was gentlemanly enough to open the door for me and walk me back to the car. The superhero movie didn't seem that good either, though I couldn't help but think that Aaron would probably like it. Too bad he spent the night with Abel instead of taking my place with Damien, though if he did, he'd be in too deep for the blonde to be happy. That was my main goal for the night, and so far, I didn't think I was handling it too well. Upon arriving at the event, Damien had some money and had the valet pick up his car, as soon as we pulled up to the entrance. It turned out that we would have to walk the red carpet, and that was an experience in itself. Damien was a private man, and I didn't know much about him yet, but the reporters and cameras flashing around us sure did. They approached him, saying all sorts of things and asking questions. Some of them even touched on me, the woman on his arm, but Damien didn't answer anything. He just smiled his charming white smile and put his arm around my waist. Who was this man? Will I ever know? There was no time for reflection now, as I was led into the most beautiful movie theater I had ever seen. I didn't even know about this place, and now I was seated in a private balcony with several large chairs, only 2 of which were in use, with small recliners on the armrests. Damien was handed our menus and thanked the clerk before taking the seat next to me and placing one in my lap. "Take what you like," he said, looking through his copy. I looked through everything, noticing that there were no prices on the menu. If you have to ask, then you can't afford it. Nice. Before I could find the drink I wanted, Damien picked himself up again and ordered us both the same drinks. He talked about his day. I obediently nodded, where I thought it was appropriate. When the drink arrived, it was in a very nice, thick, chilled glass, and there was a very pretty pink, shimmering liquid splashing around in it. I took a sip and realized the difference between cheap and expensive liquor. It was pleasant to the taste, but strong at the same time. He also brought us some of the fanciest looking fries I've ever seen, so we ate them with our drinks. At least they would soak up some of the alcohol. "So, what brings you to the premiere of a movie you don't want to see?" I asked, sipping my drink and wrinkling my nose at the strength, leaning back in the padded seat, noticing that there was a footrest as well. In this outfit, I wasn't sure using it would be a good idea. I needed to present myself like a lady, especially in the spotlight. The alcohol in my body made me want cigarettes so badly that I almost reached into my purse for them. I stopped, unable to pop out. I didn't seem to have had much luck for a long time, and I couldn't help thinking that my companion had rudely dismissed me and trampled me too soon. Or was he my employer? Anyway, now I wished I'd drank the whole thing, filling my bloodstream with nicotine before he could take it away. Now I was going to have to spend several long hours without cigarettes. "I'm friends with the director," Damien replied firmly, placing his hand on my knee as the lights began to dim and lower. Friends with the director? I would have to find out more about that, but for now the movie was about to start, and I needed to keep my mouth shut. At that moment, it became clear to me why I was wearing his gift. For his entertainment, I needed to keep my mouth closed and my legs open. A shorter skirt would have helped in this situation, as well as the complete absence of the gift. As soon as the movie started, his hand slid gently down to my lap. We were pretty secluded in the booth, probably intended that way, so I wasn't too worried about sitting down and sliding my present for him. And yet it was so dangerous to do something like that in public. He slowly circled higher and higher. Our attention should have been focused on the exciting beginning of the movie. But I was distracted. The figure eights slowly turned into smaller and smaller circles. He was taking his time, teasing me and enjoying himself. I was sure of it as he approached my sex. It became clear to me what he was looking for when he lightly touched the lace and then became more purposeful. Damien continued to tease me. Desperate for something to distract me, I grabbed my drink and started gulping it down a little too quickly. My eyes were fixed on the huge screen. I watched but couldn't see what was happening. Nothing was happening in my head, but his fingers were incredibly close. Damien was so gentle, teasing me. I knew that if I went on for the full 2 hours, he'd ruin me. I'd turn into a sweaty, panting wreck before we even got back to his house. I was both very excited now, and I wanted a cigarette more and more. The more tenderly he touched me, the more nervous I became about what was coming. To me, nervous means a cigarette, but in this case, I was nervous. But at the same time, I was very excited. He was a real cad, and I loved every moment of it. I was a little scared this time because I was still sore after what happened a few days ago. I wasn't even sure I could take it, but I knew I had to at least try, no matter what. The moment the car stop scene happened on the screen, Damien finally moved on, causing me to let out a small scream that was thankfully masked by the loud sound of the movie. I should have pushed his hand away, but no, I just sat there like that. Damien was clearly well practiced, and I was obedient while I was being tortured. A stain was left on the chair. It was humiliating to watch it. I was sure those sounds his fingers were making were extremely lewd. At that moment, I felt wonderful like I had never felt before. But it felt too much like pleasure. And that's saying something. Because live with Abel, I was being eaten like I was chocolate ice cream. I was close to the edge of the cliff. I could feel the tension building. Then suddenly it stopped. He pulled his hand away, leaving my skirt, leaving me glistening in the hall. And instead of wiping it on my clothes, I watched in bewilderment as he dipped his fingers into his drink, mixing ice cubes with my flavor and alcohol. The longer I sat there, trying to concentrate on the boring movie, the colder my butt got. I knew I needed to clean myself up as soon as possible. But not only that, I couldn't get it out of my head that I really needed to smoke right now. It was an internal struggle, honestly. As much as I wanted to be a good girl and dutifully wait for the movie to end, I felt uncomfortable and just couldn't sit still anymore. Not when I was left on that edge on purpose. Aaron or Abel would keep going. I leaned over and whispered in Damien's ear, "I need to go to the bathroom." From the way he sighed, it was clear I was going to take a small step outside too. This girl has needs. It wasn't like I was missing anything. I wasn't paying attention to what was going on as it was. I'll have to revisit this with Aaron. Or maybe with Abel to not look at it and just play with it. Either way, I missed this screening, albeit the most prestigious one. I blinked tensely when I found myself in the bright hallway and realized that I needed a cigarette more than anything. So running into the bathroom, grabbing some tissues and wiping myself down very roughly, I ran down the stairs and outside. My heart dropped as I turned around with a cigarette between my lips and met Damien's gaze. He was already standing there waiting for me. For God's sake, I just needed a quick smoke. "Couldn't last 45 minutes?" he asked. Of course he was watching me. I sighed slightly. "Could have waited longer if you hadn't interrupted me. Twice." I grunted a little, lighting from the end of the stick, and took a long double puff. Finally, it was bliss. As much as I wanted to be a good little maid for him, it was kind of hard when I wanted to smoke so badly. "I'm sorry. I just, needed it," I said, not wanting to upset him. I just couldn't concentrate on the movie. I tried to justify myself, but when I looked up at him, Damien was grinning at me. I could understand what he wanted, but there was no way he'd go after it. Not out in the open like he was now. Still smirking, he took my hand and led me toward the building, glancing at one of the waiters, who seemed to be having a smoke break. The younger guy jumped up immediately, as if he knew who Damien was and what he was up to. He took a quick puff on his cigarette, and doing a double take, left the small milk crate he was sitting on to go back inside. Was he looking at me? Why was he so shocked to see Damien with some random woman? Had Damien been here before with a woman? There wasn't much time to ponder these questions, as I was pressed against the wall with a shriek, placing one firm hand on my thigh and the other holding my steaming hand away from my lips. And from the rush of emotion, I felt my legs turn to jelly. His touch was as strong and demanding as his kiss. I had a problem. His weight was squeezing my quivering bladder. I felt like I was drowning in the best sense of the word. His caresses were almost suffocating, or my lungs weren't as good as they should be, because I got to the point where I started gulping for air as soon as the kiss broke. When he finally let go of my wrist, I mentally made a mental note to shake the growing ash off my cigarette. I couldn't keep from whimpering as he continued. Smoking down to the filter, I put the cigarette back between my lips and took a greedy puff, mindful of how badly I needed it. Even if it was difficult, as my lungs were busy puffing and I held back. Without the noise from the theater, it was so loud, I was too loud, it was fun. Even though he'd just started, I knew where this was going. Damien was so mean, he loved making me wait. It was supposed to be punishment for me wanting to smoke, but he didn't know I missed peeing when I was in the bathroom. I figured I could hold out until the end, but when he touched me again, I wasn't so sure anymore. I should have taken care of all of this, but all I thought about was going outside and inhaling nicotine while I had time. Damien, I whimpered as he continued to play, making me feel like I wouldn't be able to take it much longer. The build-up was more intense than Aaron usually was, and I couldn't tell if it was due to the need to relieve my bladder, or if the cigarette had something to do with it too. What little I did managed to draw in. I wriggled and tried to pull myself away from him, but he was too strong and pinned me against the wall, which clawed at my bare shoulders and upper back. "I can't," I whimpered, sounding as pathetic and insignificant as possible, but it didn't help me. He thrust harder. "You better not," growled Damien in my ear. I ended up dropping the cigarette as it reached the filter, and unfortunately I only took a few puffs the whole time. "You need to wait." It was impossible for nothing to happen. I knew I was about to piss him off again. I was so close to it. I knew I would upset him, but even where I was, that wasn't the only thing that would annoy him. The mess, on the other hand, would be really something. I'm a real upstart, and my bladder was full of that drink I finished while he teased me. I wasn't superhuman. What else could he expect from me? In retrospect, I should have used the restroom while I was in the bathroom. God, I wish now I had done that. Everything would have been fine if I could have squeezed my thighs together. There was no way I could get out of this situation without making a mess. In between whimpers and squeals, I wanted to warn him, but I could barely get anything but desperate screams out of my mouth. The insistent, repetitive rhythm was what turned me on. No, I can't hold... I didn't even have time to finish the sentence, because with a jolt inside me, feelings rushed through my entire body. Suddenly, I was no longer in control of myself. I soaked both the back of my skirt and Damien's hand all the way to the cuff of his jacket. He yanked his hand away angrily, but he didn't have time. Shit! His voice would have horrified me if I'd been able to pay attention to the harsh tone. I was just too depressed, leaning back against the wall with my eyes rolled back. I was brought back to reality by a searing slap on my ass. "Fucking idiot! You didn't even think to take a piss while you were in the bathroom?" he asked, pulling off his jacket and wiping his hand with it before tossing it to me. "I think we better go home." Shivering from the cold outside air and panting, I accepted the offer again and wrapped his ruined blazer around my waist, clutching my wet hands nervously. Damien's icy gaze slid over me, and he shook his head. "I'm not getting in the car looking like that. I'll have to get you naked," he demanded sternly. "Of course it is." Walking slowly back to his car, Damien followed me and opened the door, but not for me to get in. It gave us a little privacy, so he didn't rip my dress off right as we walked. He wasn't too careful, and I could hear him tearing the thin fabric as he roughly pulled it off me before helping me out. The time spent on this seemed to improve his mood. His gaze darted up and down as he helped me into the passenger seat and tossed the soiled clothes back into the box. My butt slapped against the cold leather upholstery, and I shuddered slightly as he walked over and sat behind the wheel. "You know, now that I think about it, you've given me a new experience, Livia. I've never been pushed around like this before." Damien closed his eyes and chuckled softly, almost maliciously. All the way home, Damien made me do something to him. "You better get me off at least once before we get home," he demanded firmly as he got behind the wheel. The closer we got to his estate, the faster my hand moved until I gave in and unbuckled my seatbelt. There was the sound of tinkling bumps and the clinking of bongs in the car. I was able to give him what he really needed. All I knew was that I had to get him off. If I didn't, I was sure it would be my last job with him. Hell, maybe he'd turn the car around and drop me off penniless at my apartment. That would ruin not only my night, but Erin's night as well. And I didn't like that idea at all. So I let him control me and did my best to keep up and give him what he needed. I could hear the car picking up speed, and I felt the need to get him off the road even faster. But Dame managed to keep his cool until we were parked in his driveway. That's when he started to get really hard until he was done. "Take it away! Don't you dare let one drop get on my seats!" he growled. I finally sat down. At least I was right about one thing. As soon as I managed it, Damien chuckled again. "Good girl. Now get your fat ass out of my car," he demanded. "Go to the front door and wait for my staff to bring you something to wear." Damien looked back at him, but he didn't seem like he was going to come out with me. No, ignoring me, he stayed where he was with his phone in his hand, dialing a message to someone. "Really?" I asked, nervous about what he'd said to me, but desperate to continue being a good girl for him. The way he shifted his gaze to me, and the annoyed expression that began to spread across his face, told me that he was completely serious. So as not to ruin the date between Aaron and Abel and me, I went outside immediately, wearing nothing but high-laced sandals. At least it wasn't too cold outside, but I felt completely exposed as I ran up to the house, headlights highlighting my pale back and ass, and rang the doorbell. I was made to stand there for an uncomfortable amount of time, and every time I looked back, I couldn't see anything because of the bright headlights. I was afraid to even cover myself because he was watching. So I wrapped my arms around myself as the door slowly opened, and an elderly gray-haired man stood on the other side. He was dressed in a formal suit and stared at me with a blank expression, a pale pink dress slung over his arm. "Here you are, miss," he stated firmly, holding out a nightgown to me and blocking the entrance inside. I quickly took it and struggled for a while to slip my hands through the holes because my hands were shaking. Or maybe it was my whole body shaking. I couldn't tell, but with his help, I finally put on a luxurious, warm, knee-length robe and was allowed to go inside. At the door, I was made to take off my sandals and then escorted into a large study with bookshelves along the walls, only a couple of places with windows. In the middle of the room was a massive wooden desk with a large plush chair, and on the other side of it was a couch and a couple other chairs. I decided to sit on the couch and wait there. I was left waiting for a long time, but I didn't dare to touch anything in the room. Time was running out, and I wished I'd thought to bring my phone and cigarettes with me, but I was in too much of a hurry. It was all in my purse back in the car. I was in a hurry to do what I was told, like a good girl. So, I sat on the leather couch in the most comfortable robe I'd ever felt. It covered everything, my neck, my collarbones, and the sleeves that encased my wrists. After nearly an hour of waiting, I felt like I'd read every book in his library. Damien nonchalantly walked through the door as if he had just walked in behind me and headed for the small bar set up next to his desk. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Would you like a drink?" he asked, at least acknowledging that I was alone, opened a small ice machine and put some of the cleanest ice cubes I'd ever seen into 2 small glasses, and then poured whiskey. He acted so normal, like he wasn't the one who had just made me run through his yard and stand on his porch, almost parading in front of his staff. "Yes, please," I replied cautiously, watching him raise the glass he had prepared for me. Bringing it over, he sat down in the chair across from me, still wearing his suit except for his jacket and tie. He crossed his legs so that his right foot rested on his left knee. He took a long sip of his drink and leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "Liv, you broke my rules today. Your punishment isn't over yet, but I need time to recuperate." He chuckled slightly before looking directly at me. "Thought you could use some rest yourself?" He wasn't wrong. I nodded in agreement. I felt a little better, more relaxed about sitting, even though it was boring. But hearing that my punishment wasn't over yet made me nervous again. I already knew how Dame liked to be rude, and that was when he was in a better mood and not lashing out at me. I sat there like a schoolgirl in trouble and worried about what my punishment would be now. "Thank you," I said softly, though there was a nervousness in my tone that I couldn't contain. "Get up, finish your drink, and go bend over my desk." His voice was strong and stern as he looked down at his phone. I rose to my feet and wrinkled my nose and began to swallow the remnants of Dutch courage with the scalding alcohol before I did as I was commanded, standing over the desk, leaning on my elbows. "Like this?" I asked nervously, leaning over the table and fluttering my eyelids pathetically. "What exactly?" I held back a sigh, lowering my head slightly, my black hair covering my face. "Like this, sir," I interjected politely, trying to be nice and obedient again. I heard him stand up, and at first I thought I heard his belt being taken off, but then I felt him come behind my back, and... I'm afraid to disappoint you, dear listener, but this part was cut due to YouTube rules, and the full version of this is on our Patreon. The link is in the description. "There, now it's perfect," Damien said. He surprised me. He didn't hit me, but reached across the table and reached into one of the top drawers. I let out a momentary sigh of relief. Oh no. It dawned on me. I had a premonition it was coming to this. There was no way I was going straight the next morning. I could feel his fingers all over my body. He hummed happily, as if he were painting a masterpiece. It was then that I heard the clank of a brass buckle, and then the slip of a leather belt. It had to happen one of 2 ways. The money was in the bank. I sold myself. But he wanted more. He paid more. All I had to think about was money again. Making Aaron happy. Or maybe trying to enjoy it. I wanted to relax, but when the belt rang out, I breathed a sigh of relief. The spanking on my ass was the limit. I misbehaved and deserved to just be smacked, at least when it came to Damien. I did my best to relax my body for him, wanting to both ease the discomfort and make sure he was enjoying rather than straining. Soon the burning pain was gone. It felt too easy. I could feel every inch of him doing it. Damien, being the forgiving and beautiful man he is, gave me a few moments to get used to him. "Damn, you're huge," I whimpered, praising him as he slowly at first, but still started to pick up a good pace. I knew that by the end he wouldn't be so sweet and caring anymore. After all, this was my punishment. He grinned deeply at my words as he began to pick up the pace. "How lucky you are you've been so bad, but you still get to enjoy it all," he muttered, panting. I felt his strong hands go up to my shoulders and realized he was about to start. I held on with all my might. My voice caught in my throat at first, but eventually I screamed out, feeling like he was taking everything I had from me. After all, it was only my second time. It felt good. Maybe it had something to do with all of this too. He held me tightly by the shoulders. "Oh my God, a lady," I said, throwing my head back as I was overwhelmed by the pleasure that was beginning to surge through me. It felt almost too good for me at this point. I had already completed my cycle, and now it was his turn, especially after I ruined his night at the theater. He didn't look too upset at this point though, as he began to grunt lightly with much effort. "Let it all fall out. You'll need room for more soon," said Damien nonchalantly to me. With those words, the blonde ignored me and went to make himself another drink, leaving me to slowly make a mess on the carpet beneath my feet. This new business venture of mine was creating new challenges. The next morning, I woke up in yet another strange place. It took a few seconds to realize where I was. Then I realized I was in the pool house behind Damien's mansion. Maybe if I behaved well enough and didn't pee on him, I could stay in the main house? Last night, when he was finally done with me, after a second round about half an hour later, he let me stand there dripping while he poured himself a whiskey. He kindly kissed me and gave me an affectionate squeeze before telling me where I would be staying. In true Damien style, he didn't take the time to walk me there himself, but asked one of the many pretty maids to do it for him. She was kind enough to show me where all the clothes from Damien's past, and even current relationships, were stored. It was a huge walk-in closet with various articles of clothing and lingerie. Knowing what he liked, I picked out a pair similar to the ones I'd worn before, and a nice soft pajama set. A soft pink tank top with ruffles around the bottom, and the same short shorts with ruffles around the edges. It was cute enough that I didn't mind if Damien saw me in them. I thought I'd crawl into bed with him. But no. Instead, I lay in the luxurious bed, looking up at the mirrored ceiling, and thought, looking at myself in the mirror, about the girl who'd left them. What did she look like? Had she dated him? How many girls had Dame done it with? It wasn't the sun that woke me up, but someone's loud knock on the door. I slipped into the robe left over from last night and was pulling it tight around my body when I was greeted by one of Damien's smiling drivers, holding both my purse and my all-important cigarettes. I was sorely missing them, so I hastily smoked two before I even had time to get dressed. He had to wait for me before taking me back to the apartment. While I was sitting there, he informed me that Dame had unfortunately left early in the morning and would be contacting me soon. I was left with practically nothing, with a box in my hands containing my dress from the evening, wondering if I would ever see Damien again. I'd only been there a few seconds, fussing and dealing with the ever-hungry Dave, though Aaron had left a note saying he'd fed him, before my phone rang in my purse. Pulling it out, I saw it was Abel, and just the thought of him brought a smile to my face. The man was always there when I needed him, and at that moment, I really needed his reassurance, because I knew I wouldn't see Aaron until later that evening. Disconnected from the call, I decided to take a shower before he arrived. Throwing the clothes I had left from the evening into the washing machine, I went to light a cigarette on the balcony. As soon as it was lit and I took a much-needed puff, the doorbell rang, and I realized it was Abel. Sighing, I put the cigarette on the edge of our outdoor ashtray and walked back into the house, unbuttoning my robe as I made my way to the door. It took me a split second to throw it over the back of the couch before I opened the door and found myself in Abel's tight embrace. He, clearly strong, with 2 reusable bags full of groceries in one hand, picked me up and kissed me lovingly, hugging me tightly around the waist. "Hey baby, I'm here to make you a little breakfast," he purred, gently lowering me to my feet and looking me over. "Nice pajamas. I bet they're from Damien. You can go ahead and take them off," he commented, walking into the kitchen and starting to unload the bags. I blushed. How would he know? And followed him, watching as he diligently put things away in the fridge and cabinets, clearly intending to make more than just breakfast. "That's so sweet, Abel. Thank you," I smiled, stepping out onto the balcony to get my still smoking cigarette. I left the door open so he could see and leaned against the railing before taking off my shorts and leaving them on the ground around my slippers. Once outside, I tossed them aside and my tank top soon followed. "Don't thank me yet. Just want to add some meat to your skinny bones, baby," he said with a chuckle and snapped his fingers. "Oh shit, gotta get out of the car yet." With those words, he turned and ran out of the apartment. I stood on the balcony confused, but very content to smoke a cigarette and waited for him to return. I could hear his footsteps in the hallway as he repeatedly entered, exited and re-entered, setting things up in the living room and then coming back into view. "Excuse me, I brought my streaming stuff to use your vintage gaming systems." Of course, Abel would be thinking about work before breakfast was even made. "That's all right, though I'd like to know what you mean by meat on my bones," I stated, crossing my arms. Abel chuckled, vigorously beginning to knead the batter for the pancakes. "Don't get me wrong, you look amazing. Just a little home cooking might add to your booty," he told me as he worked. "Bet you don't cook that often, do you?" He invited us over to his place. Both Aaron and I didn't like to cook. Occasionally we would cook in the heat of passion, but I don't know the last time we used the stove. We just didn't have the time. "Okay, I'll lose a little weight if you cook around the house," I teased him with as angry a smile as possible, finished my cigarette and put it out before grabbing my clothes and heading back into the house. I threw my pajamas in the wash and came back in just my red lace underwear. Abel looked back at me, and his eyes raced down my body as he smirked. "You're going to get your ass kicked real quick at my place," he said with a playful growl, and reached over to me and teasingly grabbed my ass. I rolled my eyes and pulled away, letting him get back to cooking while I went out into the living room and plopped down on the couch, giving up on the idea of taking a shower right now. As the delicious smells wafted from the kitchen, I just switched the TV to something mindless and played on my phone until Abel brought me a big plate of pancakes with scrambled eggs and bacon on the side. "I expect everything to be eaten before I eat you," he joked with a large tinge of truth. Abel took a seat next to me with his own plate, which was heaped with an amazing amount of food. In a matter of minutes, he'd consumed the entire mountain before I'd eaten half of it. We sat in silence, focused on the food. He clearly loves to feed. Eventually, I finished almost all of my food, leaving only part of a pancake and a slice of bacon. Abel grinned triumphantly as he finished those pieces, then gathered up the dishes and took them to the kitchen. Abel stayed in the kitchen for a long time, but I used it to my advantage. By the time he returned, I was already stretched out on the couch, hiding my full and bulging belly, and the dark red things were deliberately carelessly tossed across the room, out of his sight. I hoped he wasn't too full. I just had to wait for him to eat and drink me. He seemed to enjoy the moments when I lashed out. I enjoy my moments. Before sitting down at his desk, Abel took a long, painful time setting up his cameras and laptop. This was the way it was supposed to be. I just lay there, leafing through my phone, doomedly scrolling through social media, occasionally lifting my head and watching him. He was very pleasant to look at. What shocked me was when I saw him turn on one of the gaming systems and the cameras on us. "Hey," I whispered pitifully, receiving only a slight reproachful chuckle from him as he took a seat next to me, studying the view on his laptop. After grumbling disapprovingly about the image and further adjustments, Abel finally settled down next to me, forcefully pulled me to him so that my thighs were in his lap. After a few seconds, he started the stream, and I saw that it was on the one he used when we first met. It wasn't his usual stream, but on it he could do just about anything, especially with me. As I lay there, I watched the viewers come in, the meter going up every second, as he started up a new Mario game on the Nintendo 64. He didn't say anything about me at first, just socializing with the audience and stroking my ass until he needed a second hand to play with. I felt like he would never show me any attention and just use me as a prop for his audience, so I got up and left. It was just annoying. I had already waited for breakfast. I knew it was a little silly of me to be angry. All I wanted was him, not all his creaks and shit. I needed to be taken care of. Keeping my eyes on Abel, I went around the house, tidying up, but I did it a little louder than I intended. Everything seemed to be coming at me. I just couldn't keep from banging dishes in the sink as I scrubbed and cleaned. After each clink, he would glance at me and frown. He was working. While I was clearing off tables and sweeping, I was making all sorts of loud, annoying noises, doing the cleaning with annoyance, and Abel was sitting there happily chatting about nonsense in his chat room and playing his stupid game, completely ignoring me. What a jerk! Of course, I should have known I would be treated like that. After all, he was just a human being like everyone else. Slamming the toilet seat he'd left behind when I stopped to pee, I roughly pushed the door open and stepped out onto the balcony for another cigarette. I even left the door open to let all the city sounds reach the apartment as I inhaled the poison between my fingers deeply and greedily. From where I stood smoking, I could see him on the couch, his phone pointed at me as he filmed, most likely peeking at me, and shared my naked smoke with his audience, leaning back with a smirk on his face. That goofy look on his face as he chattered away. I stood there and he didn't care, and it pissed me off even more. Even Aaron never ignored me when I went like this. I at least got an affectionate slap on the ass or kisses between smoke breaks. Back in the house, I headed to the bedroom to get dressed. Since he was going to ignore me, I might as well insulate myself. But as soon as I was within arm's length of the man, he grabbed my wrist firmly. "Get your ass over here," he teased. I glanced at the screen and sighed, rolling my eyes in exaggerated surprise. I smiled and let him pull me closer until I was in his lap. He ran his hand over my cheek and then kissed me in front of the camera. When I turned my head and opened my eyes briefly, it was the first time I caught my gaze to see my face on the screen, and it was a little frightening. Men are so much warmer than us women. His body made my irritation melt away as I sank into him. When it came to a guy like Abel, it was almost annoying. He could tease and pester and still end up getting exactly what he wanted from me in the end. Was it too much to ask to be strong enough to deny him that desire? I thought he looked so nice with that hair he tied back in a bun. He was showing off his tanned, muscular, easy to give in to me body. I really felt blessed to be alone with him, to touch him and smell him, even though there were thousands of people watching us both. "Get on your knees," he muttered quietly, a stage direction meant to be overheard by the audience. He said this while patting the couch next to him, showing me where he wanted me. I did as I was told and sat down on the couch, first on my hands and knees, and then I let my upper body relax, and my shoulders slumped onto the cushion along with my cheek. I couldn't see much from this position, but soon I felt his hand slap my ass. Another invisible director. "Listen, guys, sometimes you need to put the controller aside and give your girl some affection," he stated. His large palms tickled me gently. He chuckled almost evilly before stating, "I know a guy who was with her last night, and I bet she needs a good night to calm her down." Having said that, he fell silent and soon had his face pressed against me. The sensation was amazing, like a cat over a bowl of milk. Damien showed no interest in her, except with his fingers. I needed Abel to want her. Thankfully, the ignoring was short-lived because it wasn't long before we moved on to a new phase. Abel forced me to stay still while he gave me what I had been craving for so long. It felt like an eternity had passed, the longest and most blissful few minutes I had ever experienced. I wanted it to go on forever. But Abel, being Abel, had no sooner completed the process than he withdrew himself from me. Soon, I was focused on him again. "I want you to sit on the coffee table. Knowing you, you better not mess anything up." Panic gripped me. How was I supposed to do this? If he hit the spot? There were cables and even one camera on a short tripod, one that was pointed directly at us. I looked back at him questioningly and he nodded, confirming the order. I blushed slightly, awkwardly standing up and being careful as I could easily slip on the coffee table, which groaned as my weight settled, and then tried to put my hands and knees in the right places so I wouldn't accidentally knock something else over. The situation was stressful, and certainly not one of my fantasies, especially when I took a good look at the view of my person on the computer screen in front of me. And looking back as if in a mirror, I had to smile at what I saw. I recommend making women wait a little longer when they feel the need, Abel said with a slight sigh. I could feel him. She wants it right now, right, baby? He announced. I couldn't say that. Not on set. Not when I saw the audience growing in numbers and the chat buzzing right in front of my face as I felt and watched. But I knew he was serious when he stopped halfway through again and waited. I could feel his eyes burning into the back of my head with a look I didn't need to see to understand. He had expectations that needed to be met, just like any other man. Yes, I nodded and finally answered. I really, really want this, Abel, please. I gave the permission he craved and instinctively inhaled, shifting my hips slightly to prove my point. Confirmation seemed to be the only thing he was waiting for with a manly wheeze he did so, and then pulled back for a moment. I felt as if it had been forgotten since last night. The creaking of the cheap coffee table that Aaron had recently assembled was noticed not only by me, but also by the chat room, with many of them joking about, will she make it before the table breaks? If the man behind the dangerous crunching sounds was aware of it, he ignored the thought. Man, she's really good tonight. I bet you guys wish you were here to feel it too. Oh, shit. I threw my head back. The sensation was almost euphoric, like I was high, and it was impossible for me to keep track of what was happening in front of me. I felt a deep, burning pleasure inside me, letting me know that I was close. So close. I hoped I hadn't messed anything up, because for the second time in 24 hours, the same thing happened. This time, it was the entire table beneath me. By the time Abel pushed into me with impossible force for the last time, I was already too aroused to realize anything. His intermittent breathing behind me was a sure sign that he wasn't the type to stop without finishing what he'd started. Looks like I need to clean up my act before I can get back to playing, he stated. Abel still continued to play, stepping back and watching me get off the table. You go take a shower. In the meantime, I'll keep talking. The way smooth his voice sounded really helped calm me down, especially since it was part of his performance art. I got off the table as carefully as I'd sat down and hurried out of sight. Abel immediately set about cleaning up, stopping in front of me to kiss me gently on the lips and then pick up the paper towels. I sprinted to the bathroom. Soon I was under the jets of water and taking a long shower. I felt incredibly dirty. I was really dirty. Through the shower, I could still hear my client working. It's funny to say, but he was playing an old video game and complimenting me. But he was really working, and it was so interesting to be on the other side of the process. Finishing my shower, I stepped out in my towel. Aaron tidied it up again. After drying my hair, I headed outside for another smoke. I was going to catch up on my work from yesterday. This time I sprawled out on 2 pillows, stretching my legs out so that I wished Abel's knees were resting on them, or even Aaron's. This time I allowed myself to savor the smoky flavor that flowed over my tongue, down my throat, and into my waiting lungs. A cigarette after coitus is awesome. I was lucky that with the help of my addiction, I was able to enjoy the blissful high of a good moment a little longer, sinking into the firm pillow and letting my towel hang down slightly. Damien wouldn't allow for such bliss. The breeze touched my freshly washed skin pleasantly. What a tumultuous roller coaster of emotions and events we've just witnessed in this intense first part of the story. Let me remind you right away that we already have the uncensored half version of this story posted on our Patreon, links in the description. And now let's continue with the breakdown of the story. It's clear that the relationship dynamic between our main character and Damien is incredibly complex, fraught with tension, power struggles, and deep desire. From the very beginning, we are immersed in a scene filled with domination and submission, where Damien holds all the power over our protagonist, making her wait, punishing her for her desires. The interplay between pleasure and pain, control and submission is palpable, keeping us on edge, eagerly waiting to see what happens next. But there's more than just physical desire here. There is a psychological depth to their relationship, hinted at by the protagonist's inner thoughts and conflicting emotions. Despite the power dynamic, there is a sense of vulnerability and longing, a desire for connection and acceptance, even in the midst of punishment. As we are left hanging, wondering what will happen next, it becomes clear that we still have much to learn about these characters and their motivations. What's in store for our main character and Damien? And what other challenges and obstacles will they face along the way? One thing is for sure, the journey is far from over, and I, for one, can't wait to see where it leads. Again, the full uncensored version of this story is available on our Patreon, so be sure to check it out there if you want to delve deeper into this compelling story. Until next time, stay curious, my friends.